What is up, everybody? Welcome here to Half-Ass Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. And today, we are coming here to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Very, very interesting title. But before we get to our review, ladies and gentlemen, here with me on the HAP film panel tonight, Smith will be here soon, but we have the author, the editor, the illustrator, the creator, the end-all and be-all of not only Walter Paisley Cafe, but Spadal. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Plaid. Mark, say what's up to the people, man.
Hey, everybody. Happy Pride Month starting now. So, hello to all my friends, relatives, loved ones in the LGBTQ plus community.
That's it. Thought you had more. Okay. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be reviewing A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Now, before we get into the actual meat of the story, because Mark, we were talking here before, during pre-recording about just exactly how important this film is and just exactly what kind of factors this film brings to the entire franchise as a whole. Dream Warriors is a very interesting title for this movie. Before watching this movie, I thought to myself, okay, it's called Dream Warriors. We know that it's a Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy's in everybody's dreams and nightmares in their head when they fall asleep, when they're unconscious, right? And if he kills you in your sleep, you die in real life. But now we have an entire group of people that are in a what do we call it? A psych ward, right, Mark? Something like that, right? So an entire group of people in a psych ward being haunted by Freddy Krueger. Now there's some interesting events that happen in this movie that are very, very, very weird when it comes to this movie being compared to the last two. Now, I do want to ask you, Mark, in terms of this movie, what exactly do you know? Or I wouldn't say no, but what exactly do you think this movie means to the entire franchise?
Well, I really think that this one was where Freddy really came into his own. We had one, and it was kind of like, yeah, I mean, it was real mind blowing for the time and things like that. And Freddy really was, the most unusual slasher to ever grace the silver screen at the time. And then we had two, which, deviated. We had the whole other actor, that wasn't Robert Englund playing Freddy and things like that. Some of his, sort of snarky one-liners, just very few. In this one, I don't know. There's a little bit more one-liners. Honestly, I don't think they really went over the top, but there was definitely more to the character of Freddy that I think that's what gelled in people's minds as to who Freddy Krueger is, and from that point onward in the franchise.
Yeah, because this movie had it all. I mean, you're talking about whether it had if anything, it didn't really necessarily have what, at least too much, was the actual the fear factor. No point intended. But the fear factor of like jump scares, right? A lot of the things that happen nowadays and a lot of things that were happening even back in the 80s was jump scares, right? I mean, you talk about Halloween, Friday the 13th, like those movies had those jump scares as well. But
Mm-hmm.
this movie particularly did not have necessarily that, but it still kept the movie scary. It still kept that horror, the core of horror into this movie. And that is what I really appreciated about it, because I one of the things I also appreciated too was the fact they knew where to put the humor. This was the first movie of the three that we've reviewed so far and that I've seen so far that knew where to place everything. They knew where to place the jokes. They knew where to place the scary parts. They knew where to place, Kristen crying every five minutes. They knew how to do that. And I didn't do too much research on this movie because when I was doing a little bit of research on on the main actress, I kind of got spoiled for the next movie. So I was like, the fuck with it. I'll just research finish watching or reviewing the entire franchise. But this movie had it all. We started out at the beginning of this movie with Kristen, and she had this weird nightmare. And then one of the elements of this movie that I really loved was we had a scene later in Kristen's nightmare towards the end of the movie where she goes back to this very same dream / nightmare. Again, I give credit where credit's due. Whoever came up with this, Wes Craven or whoever did this movie, I gotta give them credit. That was amazing. And for a movie that came out in the 80s, I would think not many movies were doing that. Not many movies are going back to the story that they were telling at the beginning of the film. This movie did that. We're talking 1987, not 2017. 1987, guys.
Right.
Mark, what were some of the elements that you enjoyed from this movie in terms of, I gave the example of them going back to that scene. What were some of the elements that stood out?
Oh yeah, that was really great. Yeah, that's that. I remember seeing that for the first time back in the 80s, and and what I really appreciated too was how sort of the dream elements came into that too, and then the whole thing about the sort of false ending there. I mean, I think I've seen that quite a bit recently, in some other movies and things like that, but that was a rare treat at the time. And of course, like there you go about the humor being well taken, where the mother was at the door at the end, where she was at the door of Kristen's bedroom, and then Freddy, all right, where's my bourbon, bitch? And it tears her head off, and she starts. Oh yeah, that was absolutely wonderful. Yeah, so great stuff there. Yeah, and so I don't know. They of course they brought back Nancy, the same actress and everything. So really seeing it get back to its elements, and kind of, I don't know, it's like, I with Nightmare 2, hey, I gave it a C+. I mean, it was okay, but it felt like a deviation, and then something about the third one, felt like it was what the franchise was really about.
Yes, exactly. And you hit the nail right on the head. This was what I felt like the first movie should have been. This was a step in the right direction, I felt like. And again, not to shit completely on the second movie, not to shit completely on the first movie, but those first two movies kind of gave me a conflicting idea of what the franchise was all about, of what Freddy Krueger was all about. We got a lot of information in this movie about Freddy Krueger as well, him as a character and his backstory, which I'd never heard of. And I never thought that they would even dive more into his backstory, but they did. And they did in this movie. Like, and then we find out, and do we get the plot twist? I mean, it's not really that big of a plot twist because I'm still left with my head scratching as to like, why was this even a part of the movie? And they made it into a huge part of the movie because, obviously with the not the detective guy, but one of the doctors, the old dude, he digs up the grave. He and Nancy's dad, who's a sheriff, they dig up the grave and he pours alcohol or tap water or something onto the skeleton, and there goes Freddy. Freddy's gone. Now again, a lot happened in this movie.
The holy water. That was holy water.
Yeah, holy water.
Yeah, because he went to the church and still put the holy water in John Saxon's booze bottle, and stole the cross.
and again, a lot happened in this movie. A lot. We're talking about in terms of death. We're talking about notable characters having that shining moment. Hell, even characters I think were even going to last in this movie ended up living. I keep watching more and more horror movies where I keep seeing the black guy actually living in the end to see the end of
Yeah,
the movie.
yeah.
I always thought that that was a big cliche when I was a kid growing up, in the early 2000s, of like there was always this running joke of like the black guy's always the first one to die or whatever. But
Why the
then
black guy
as
always
an
got to
adult, I'm
die?
starting to see these movies. Yeah. And I'm starting to see these movies where it's like, oh, the black guy actually lives. And now I'm not saying they're their hero
And
or
this
anything,
was
but they live.
1987.
87, yeah.
Yeah,
This
I
was
was
in the
blown away
80s.
because I forgot, and I was like, "Wait a minute, Kincaid lives? Holy shit! This is 1987. Ronald Reagan was still in office. That was not fashionable to have the black guy in a horror movie live in
Yeah.
1987. That was amazing. Yeah,
And with that, I can't talk about Kincaid without talking about this scene. This scene had me laughing my ass off.
Me too. Let's go kick the motherfucker's ass all over Dreamland.
I mean, come on, man. You can't talk about Kincaid without talking about that. That scene had me dead. Like that shit had me dead. I read again another character that I thought was for surely like I just kept waiting for him to die. I'm like, all right, he's made it pretty fucking far in this movie. How long until this dude fucking dies? And guess what? You don't see it. You never see it. It's kind of like watching. You ever seen that movie Hot Tub Time Machine?
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like watching Crispin Glover's character lose his arm, trying to watch him lose his arm the entire movie. That's what it's like watching a black guy in a horror movie to me. Because I'm like, all right, when are they gonna kill him? When are they gonna kill this guy? And they never do. They never do. Just like LL Cool J's character in Halloween H2O. It never happens.
Right.
But you had Kincaid in this movie. You had the kid in the wheelchair. You had Kristen. Look, Mark, I don't even know where to start about this movie. I mean, I really am speaking highly of this movie, and rightfully so. Now there are some holes in this movie, as there are in every horror movie. I don't think every horror movie will ever be well put together as perfectly as some of the old classics. That's just the world we live in now, right? Everybody's just trying to spit out whatever for money or recognition or whatever. But back in the day, they took their time. They took their time with these horror movies, and Dream Warriors is the perfect example of the late 80s horror genre and the late 80s horror era. And I remember the last one we talked about, right? Nightmare on Elm Street 2, where we talked about the 80s style, the 80s fashion, 80s hair. We saw Jesse, the main character from the last one, the way he was and putting on the sunglasses, like it was as 80s could get. And I thought that this franchise was that was it for the 80s with this franchise. So we weren't really going to get the 80s style. And although it came out in 87, I didn't think we were still going to get that 80s style in this movie. I thought we were going to get some, like, you know what I mean? Some movies where you can't really tell what kind of era it came out in because it's that kind of movie. I thought we were going to get that in this, but guess what? This movie got even more 80s than the last one. I mean, this movie was, and again, not in a bad way. Just want to put that out there. Not in a bad way. This is in a good way. I really do envy the people that grew up, that were around that age in the 80s. You know what I mean? Just living life to the fullest in the 80s. I really do envy those people because life was a lot simpler back then. Even though I wasn't alive in the 80s, I'm sure life was a lot simpler back then.
I think one thing that really brought the 80s into the movie was Dokken, the hair metal band on the soundtrack. The Dream Warrior, that was written for the movie, and there was another song too. And yeah, I was reading in Wikipedia that that soundtrack was a huge hit. Made a lot of money for them, so they continued to have more hair metal in I don't know. They said metal, but I'll admit because like I was a punk rocker back in the 80s. I hated hair metal. The hair metal guys were a bunch of assholes. That was the whole thing. Be a dick and all that stuff and pick on nerds and punk rockers, and shit like that. And by the time I got into punk rock, metal, it was way distant from the hair metal stuff, But now I have an appreciation for it because it's campy and cheesy, So I think and then I sent you that video, the Dokken official video. Which I think was hilarious. Where she she's putting together the popsicle stick house and she's holding the Dokken logo, and then of course just that ending where Freddy wakes up from a nightmare because he was dreaming about Dokken. Those guys come from, So that was really like wow, 80s all over the place in that.
And on top of that too, man, I really enjoy the fact they put Into the Fire in this movie too. Like I'm sitting there jamming at the beginning of the movie, and all of a sudden, like she's putting together the that very same house as well, and you just hear Into the Fire, and I'm just like, oh my god, like I fucking love that song, I'm sitting there jamming. I'm like, dude, I already love this movie. I'm like, dude, you can't get more 80s than the last one, but yet you still managed to fucking do it, and that's what I love about this movie as well. That's just another caveat. That's the icing on top of the cake when it comes to this third sequel. Now that we've gotten all the pleasantries of this movie, I wouldn't say all of the pleasantries, but the in your face pleasantries out of the way with this movie. Now let's get down to the meat, because now we're talking about a guy that we've seen in the past two movies do what they did. Because remember, the first movie, we had that Freddy that they were trying to solidify the foundation with, right? This was our very first look at Freddy Krueger. And then the last movie, they switched it up on us. Remember, Robert Englund was barely in the movie. They tried to go for this darker, grittier, Freddy Krueger, deeper voice and all that shit, right? And then we got to this movie, so we kind of didn't know what to expect, especially me. I had no idea what to expect, except we're getting Robert Englund back, right? And it's called Dream Warriors, so there's gonna be some fighting back in these nightmares. And I wonder how many people they're gonna do it. Is it gonna, because most horror movies, let's face it, if it's not Final Destination, most horror movies you have about maybe the average of maybe 5 people in a movie, 5 or 6 people in a movie. That's why a lot of horror movies are very cheap to make, because you don't really need to cast that many people. But now we're talking 1987, still in that era of your average, the average number of people you need, maybe 5, 6, 7 people in a movie. And then you got like the sub people, the people, the background people that don't really matter, maybe sheriffs. You might have to buy every horror movie, you got to buy sheriffs, right? You got to have some cast some sheriffs somewhere. But we're talking about the 80s, and you have how many people in this movie? More than I could count, Mark.
Right, yeah.
More than I could fucking count. We're seeing people that are by the numbers within the first 30 minutes of this movie, by numbers, in Freddy's nightmare, hanging from a noose. Numbers of them when she opens up that door. And dude, I'm hooked at this point. I'm like, okay, we are going to do something much deeper in this movie. Much, much deeper in this movie. And Dream Warriors was a perfect title. I don't know if that was Wes Craven's idea. I have no idea. But this was a perfect fucking title for this movie. Because, and we're talking about a time where we're not, all these agendas aren't being pushed in our face for us to be pressured to make this kind of character or that kind of character and all this representation shit. No. These guys had the original idea of creating their own characters and having them all different. You had the schizophrenia type of person. You had the person in the wheelchair. You had the crazy hot chick and Patricia Arquette, who was Kristen. You had the black guy, the funny dude. Why I keep Kincaid, right? You had all these different characters, and then you throw in the mix the I keep forgetting the guy, the main guy. What's his name?
that was
The guy that killed him.
yeah,
The doctor.
Doctor oh crap.
The doctor guy.
Yeah.
But like you had his character, and then on top of that, again, we're gonna be talking about the icing on the cake here tonight, folks, because in case you all don't like really recognize or can see what I'm talking about, I really like this movie. If you all can't tell, so like, this is all the icing on the cake that I'm talking about, right? The icing on the cake is you bring in a character like Nancy again, because a lot of horror movies, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, because you would know better than I would, but a lot of horror movies, and I would go as far as saying most horror movies that do return their old characters, they don't do it right. They don't do it right. Even Halloween, and as much as I love Halloween, and I defend Halloween until the day that I die, that franchise until the day that I die, at least for now, we'll see until the next one comes out. But that franchise fucked up Jamie Lee Curtis's return. And I'm not going to say an H2O, but with Resurrection, it was bad. But now we're talking, and we'll talk about 4 probably next week when we get to that point too. The little spoiler that I got from 4. But with this movie, bringing Nancy back, they didn't bring her back to say, "Oh, I've done this before. Let's do this." No. They could have gone that easy route and had Nancy be one of the patients. They could have gone the easy, which is what I thought was going to happen. Was that, oh, well, she went crazy in the first one, right? You know, it could have looked like this could have been a murder. She could have murdered someone. The first one ended very weirdly. We talked about that. We talked about that weird cliffhanger that the lines were blurred at the end of the last time we saw Nancy. The lines were blurred.
Oh, absolutely.
Last time we saw Nancy, the lines were blurred. And now we come to this movie, and they could have easily said, you know what? Let's just put her in the psycho ward and have her be one of the patients. But you know what they did? They said, no, that's too easy. We're going to have Nancy be the not necessarily role model, but be the leader in this one, and not from necessarily the inside, but from the outside. From the outside looking in. And she goes into there as not just someone who's actually experienced this shit, but from someone who can say, hey, I am a credible source. I am well documented on this shit. And I'm coming in as another doctor or another, what do they call it? Consultant, right? So she's coming in as someone that legally, and I know this it might not mean a lot to some people, hell, maybe not most people, but to me, as a viewer and as, you know, part of the audience, I'm thinking to myself, this is super duper creative, and this is a super nod to the fans saying, hey, we're giving you guys quality story already. That we're not fucking around. She's made it a mission to come back because she could have easily gone somewhere else and said, oh, she's living her life right now. How many times have we heard that in the horror movie franchise, right? Said, oh, the main character so-and-so is one living her life right now. They suffered this 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. But she came back to help them. Oh, man. Mark, I want to know what kind of caught you off guard with this movie, but in a good way? What kind of caught you by surprise in a good way?
Wow. Yeah. Well, with that fresh in my mind, yeah, that was a pretty solid move to have Nancy and who she was in the movie, and how she was a part of it. Interesting character development, which, I mean, they could have gone, like we said, they could have gone in all kinds of directions with the way it ended. A lot of things were left open-ended, a lot with the assumption. And then, of course, in number 2, they said that I think they said she died or whatever, but that was just a rumor, so that wasn't completely confirmed. So, yeah, and then she went on to, like, medical school, and, she was doing some research, so this gave this impression that that I don't know, it solidified her character. She's a little bit older, and she was fighting it. It was like a positive thing. I mean, regardless of how the movie came out, but for her, but just her entering that. So yeah, that was pretty good. Also, what I really liked is I think this movie did a lot for the characters that I think was kind of the intention in the first two. Because I mean, obviously when we think about slasher films, Friday the 13th always is the one that comes to mind. And even if people aren't directly pointing to Friday the 13th, they say things like, oh, this trope and that trope and this. And one of the tropes about, like, you have a group of teenagers and they're in a camp, and there's all the characters are just these two-dimensional or less stereotypes. And some of the characters are established to where it's kind of like, oh yeah, you either one, you kind of want to see them get it, or two, you just know how they're going to get it, and you wonder how and you wonder how how they are going to get it. But all these characters were sympathetic. I mean, there was one of the girls was an ex-junkie, but she was trying to get out of it. So they all had heart, in their own way and everything. So that's and there was kind of that angle in the first two movies, but I don't know, something about these characters, they just seemed more developed. So they didn't want to go on the whole wooden stereotype thing. They tried to have pretty much a full movie here. And yeah, I think that was definitely a plus. But my biggest surprise still has to be Kincaid lived. Yeah, I mean, I like wrote that in my notes in all caps,
Dude, I was as shocked as you that Kincaid lived, man. I was like, dude, they really invested in this guy. They really did. And I loved you said that, because the characters, to me, just to add what you were saying about all the characters, like, and what they did, is that, to me, they were able to give you a backstory without giving you all this context of the backstory. And then how they only told you not just what we needed, but what they only wanted to tell us. They told us what they wanted to tell us, while also hitting that point of, this is all you need to know about this character. You don't need to know whether they had two parents in the home. You don't need to know whether they're, gay or straight. You don't need to know this or that. All you need to know is what we want you guys to know, because it's going to serve the purpose later on when they have to face Freddy. And that is what I love. That is what I miss about movies, period. Is only say as much as you want, but with as little detail as you can, because let the detail play out in the movie. That's what you need. That's what you need. And just like when you mentioned the chick who was the junkie, right? What was her name? It was like Taryn or something, right?
That's what it was.
Like that. And so when she was in the alley, and I love the costumes that they did for this movie too. They put a lot of work. I would love to see how much money they spent on the budget for this movie, because it was a lot, especially with the cars, all those cars, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, and so Taryn in the alley, and the way that Freddy killed her, where he like injected her with all of that whatever that shit was, and killed her with that. I was like, look, this is a Nightmare on Elm Street. You never know what to expect, because I never would have expected that that's the way she would die. And I'm telling you, man, the more and more that I watch this shit, the more and more I'm actually starting to like it a lot, a lot. And that's one of those things, man, that this is one of those movies where I'm like, they hit the nail right on the head. They really did.
Go
ahead.
Sorry. I mean, what you're talking about here, I read the Wikipedia article today And yeah, they've got a pretty good. They got a lot about how the movie was written. You know, the whole process. You know, Wes Craven didn't direct this one, but he was one of 5 screenwriters, and the final product was probably like the third um, the third draft or whatever. Like the fight, you know, there were 2 drafts that were directly involved, and then John Saxon and Robert Englund had independently written screenplays for what they thought uh, Nightmare 3 should be. And although they independently did that, they brought it back into the movie, and some of those elements were taken. But, you know, and the thing is like when you have like 4 or 5 screenwriters, you know, sometimes that could be a mess. And then, in this case, yeah, I think it turned out good where, I've been in situations where I've written with more than one person, and or you see the videos of like people in a writing room, writers room, stuff like that. But there are definitely a lot of elements where these things can work, and I think it really worked out. You know, looking at some of the old drafts and the things they had, there were a lot of good ideas, but they really had to bang out a lot of the dents and just smooth a lot of things over. And I think it just really worked out. So where they pretty much this whole screenplay was by committee, and then I forget the director's name, but he's the one that had to bring it all together. So that's really, like you said with the stuff, like less is more came to my head. Like anybody's taken a writing class or a creative writing class or a workshop or something like that, and has heard that phrase. So, but that's pretty much what you described in what you said about the characters' background and their development and everything like that.
You're exactly right. Less is more with this movie, and that's what they gave us. And like you said, writers need to take they need to take note. They need to watch this movie and take note. Less is definitely more. In most areas. Shout out to Jaren. He says, "Sup, fellas." Yo, what up, Jaren? Always coming through. Always coming through. Thank you, man, for support here on this channel. I can't thank you enough, man. You're always in here at every live stream, man. I can't thank you enough. Also, Jaren says, "I see a troll was a foot." Yeah, look, guys. I enjoy you guys coming in here and blowing the live chat and stuff, but man, I don't know who this is, but whoever this Boris person is, man, I had to block him or put him in timeout or whatever I did. I don't even know, but yeah, man, don't do that. Don't be a troll on here, man. That's not cool. Because it's not like I'm gonna acknowledge it anyways in terms of like putting it up here. Like I can see the comments before I click on them, so there's no point in trolling in this chat room, guys. So just make sure you guys are being respectful and mindful as well. But yeah, shout out to Jaren for coming through as usual. Always showing support. But yes, Mark, look, there's another character that we haven't spoken too much of yet. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit. Haven't spoken too much of it yet. Kristen. So we have Kristen, who is I don't think there's one main character in this movie. I think that this movie kind of does revolve around a lot of people, while still holding that plot that is surrounded by people, right? They're surrounded by everyone. Kind of keeps everyone in this bubble, per se. Kristen, very, very interesting character. Because she didn't come here on her own. I mean, you could probably make the argument that her mom put her there. That her mom is the reason why all of this shit is happening. I mean, because Kristen was at her home and she was having these nightmares. But the fact that after her mom puts her in this hospital, we find out that Kristen is not the only person running around, because we see these movies, right? We watch these movies and it's like, okay, one person, and then they're connected to these other group of people. So now everybody's starting to have these nightmares, right? Mm-hmm. But now we see that, it's kind of like being a mutant. It's kind of like, let's say you're a rogue, right? And then you're being brought to Professor X's, school of mutants, and you realize, oh shit, there are other mutants here. There's other people like me here. So I'm not the only person dealing with real life issues of being a mutant and then being chastised for it or being looked at weird. And now she comes to the psych ward, or is forced to go to the psych ward, right? And then we see these other characters, just like her, that have met Freddy Krueger. Now, here's where it starts to get even more interesting. We are seeing how every single one of them were reacting. Now, hear me out, because it's the first time I've seen this in any horror franchise, where it's kind of like going to an AA meeting, an Alcohol Anonymous meeting, right? Except this isn't an AA meeting. This isn't a what do they call it? Where
therapy?
like, yeah, it's group therapy, but it's not for drugs. It's not for alcohol. It's not for sex or anything like that. This is a group meeting for being victims of one person. That is crazy. That is crazy. Now, in real life, that would be terrible, obviously. But we are talking about a completely fictional story right now. You want to talk about genius writing? Wow. Whoever came up with that in that writer's room. You said it was what, 5 people that helped write this story, right? Write the script?
Yeah, at least 4.
Out of the 4 people, that was fucking amazing. That was fucking amazing. Because I'm like, wow. We're sitting here watching a movie where these people, they're sitting here sulking and what's the word for it? Comforting each other, right? And helping each other out, being there for one another because of one man. Like that to me, that should tell you how powerful Freddy Krueger is in this universe. That should tell you that he is the only one pulling all the strings. No pun intended. He's the only one pulling all the strings here. No one else is in control except for Freddy Krueger. Freddy fucking Krueger is the guy you need to go to if you want to get out of your own dreams. You want to wake up, you got to go through him. Period. And Mark, I want to go to a scene here that you were talking about earlier, that you were talking about that stood out to you. And I want you to kind of do you want me to just pull up the clip real quick? The guy being pulled about the strings, his veins. Let me go ahead. Screen. Hold on. All right. Now, this right here, ladies and gentlemen, I just want you guys to see this, because Mark mentioned this scene before we started recording, before we went live. And one of the things he told me, Mark, which I I absolutely love the fact that you mentioned this scene, because I almost forgot about it a little bit, was the fact that this was such a gruesome scene, but it was also telling a story.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. But what I want to do first, I want to show you guys this scene. Hopefully, we don't get any copyright, any copyright shit going on. But
yeah, fair use, YouTube.
And the fact that they show you this, the fact that they show him without the strings, look at this, and then they go back to it.
Yeah, and that was a great shot. That's a creepy shot. Yeah. I mean, hats off to the cinematography in this scene too.
And that should show you, man. You never know. You never know what you're gonna see in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. That is the one thing I want to say about this.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jaren. Jaren says, "Fuck, that's creepy."
Yeah. I mean, like at this point in my life, I'm not a very squeamish person at all. The first time I saw that, I almost fainted,
Really?
because I had something about how squeamish I was about like arteries and veins. It wasn't so much blood, but there was something about that, like where, and like sometimes, like I would be in a health class or a science class, and they would start talking about like the heart and the blood and the veins, and I would get like weak. And so the first time I saw this, yeah, it was just, oh, whoa, whoa, yeah, it was just, wow, it really had me. And and I haven't seen this film in a very long time. I've since then, like at the time, I never had my blood drawn, never had very many, shots or anything. Now it's like, well, I've had medical things done to me, and like I could watch somebody take the blood out of my arm and things like that. So I thought I'd gotten completely over that squeamishness, but seeing that today, it gave me chills all over again. Yeah, I was just like, that brought me right back to when I was like 18 years old, watching that for the first time. I was just like, it wasn't like I got squeamish, but it just, the chills, I just really felt that.
I've never been a squeamish person, man. I've never been really squeamish. Maybe it's just because I've been watching shit like that ever since I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like, whereas I watch remember I was still technically a kid when the Rob Zombie Halloween movies came out. What? Damn, it's been almost 15 years. I want to say that's crazy that this movie's been out that long. But yeah, I remember being a kid and watching Devil's Rejects and stuff. So it's just you see all that gruesome stuff, for such a long period of time. You kind of like, now again, I've never seen that kind of stuff in person, so maybe it may be a little bit different. But in terms of movies, seeing something on screen like that, easy peasy. I remember watching this earlier last night, and I was like, you know what, man, this movie has a lot of first in it. It has a lot of new things that they've introduced to Freddy's character, and it didn't hurt his character. It just added more layers and more depth to what we could finally be building up to. Because again, the cliffhanger that they left off the movie with, which wasn't really a big cliffhanger or anything, like it was a very subtle cliffhanger, which is what they needed in this movie, which was the light coming on into that little house of Freddy's, and that was it. The doctor, he didn't open up his eyes, he didn't get up and scream, he wasn't sweating, he had a good night's sleep, so he thought. And then that light comes on, and then the credits roll. I love that because at least it wasn't some kind of mastermind kind of plot or anything like that, but it was a very subtle ending, and it ended way better than the last two did. Definitely way better than the first one. Yeah. So right now, as far as this franchise, the ending of this movie, spectacular. Number one thus far compared to the last two.
Yeah, but hats off to whoever figured that out. They were just like, because I mean the second ending, I don't know, it was kind of reminiscent of the first one. It's like, yeah, they were just like, yeah, we got to do something different, and I mean, but that's pretty much, I don't know, it was funny, like the whole movie, I mean, they kept everything, Freddy Krueger or whatever, Nightmare on Elm Street, but they just twisted it just enough to make it its own without going out. So yeah, just good calls all around.
Yeah, man. And now we get to a point of this movie where the doctor is talking to some a woman. At first I want to call her Sister Helen. I can't even remember what her name was, but I call everybody that, every Sister Helen. I don't know. But she's a what do you call them, Mark?
A nun?
Nun, yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the word, man. But
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Hey, man, do it all the time. That only gets worse when you get older.
Well, I mean, because I'm also kind of an idiot, so I think like whenever I think of that, like whenever I see someone dressed like that, I automatically think just nun, you know. But I think they have like different names or something like that, depending on whatever. I have no idea. But yeah, we see the nun, right? And she explains again. I'm not even gonna lie. Totally went over my head that she was Freddy's mom. Totally went over my head because when I watched it as she's talking to the doctor and telling him, you know, Freddy's backstory and then his mom's backstory. Again, this backstory was very twisted and fucked up because we learn about Freddy as an adult in the first one, and then she talks about Freddy, and then you know you get his mom who is the nun talking about Freddy in this movie and his backstory, and I'm like, this sounds a lot like, yeah, I don't know if you know a lot about Carnage and the comic book movies. I mean not in the comic movies, in the comic books about Cletus Cassidy. But he, you know, Freddy's backstory is very similar to Carnage's, you know, the character Carnage's backstory, at least the original backstory of the comics, of like he was just born evil. Like he just did this. This wasn't like something terrible happened to him or anything like that. Like his mom had a fucked up life. He grew up and had a fucked up life. Like, dude, this backstory, and it took what 30 seconds for her to tell the story, right? Again, perfect writing and perfect execution, because she told a story of the mom being like raped in prison when she was she was also a nun, I believe, or something like that, in a prison, and was like raped by like, you know,
well, they didn't
inmates.
reveal that there was you know, when you said she was a nun, it's like, yeah, when she was telling the story in the beginning, she didn't say, you know, that all she said was that she worked there, and yeah. But one of my favorite lines comes out of that scene: "The bastard son of 100 maniacs." I mean, that should be on the T-shirt.
Yes, but that was the one that stood out to me, because I'm like, okay, how is that not a clip? How is that not like the talking piece for the character of Freddy Krueger? Period. Because you now just opened up a whole new can of worms with just that one phrase. The bastard of 100 maniacs. Bruh. That was crazy. And then after that, 30 seconds later, she fades out. She's gone. Now it's like, whoa, now what we gotta do. Now here's the part where I actually had the conflict with this movie. Now, this is gonna be my part of the movie where I thought they could have done a lot better with just scrapping this whole idea of this part and opening up a new layer. Maybe I'll regret saying that. Maybe I'll understand why they went this route when we watch the next one, or maybe later on in the franchise. I have no idea. But for right now, because I'm only judging this movie from the movie alone and from the past two that I've watched, this was where they fucked up with this movie. The doctor goes and he finds Nancy. He and Nancy go and find the dad. Then, obviously, the dad's being an asshole, whatever, being a piece of shit. Reminds me a lot of like Wolverine and the newer X-Men movies, right? The way he treated, you know, in First Class, right? Where it's like pretty much where it's like, hey, we want you to join our team. We want you to help us. So he's just like sitting, you know, smoking a cigar, and he just looks at Magneto and Professor X and says, "Fuck off." and they go on about their day, and they had to, you know, come up with, you know, a different solution, whatever. This was much like that, except the doctor comes back, and he comes back alone, and he does something again I never thought I would see this character do. This dude steps up. He steps to the sheriff, picks him up, grabs him, and says, "Hey, look, man, people are gonna die. Your daughter's life is in jeopardy right now. Get your shit together. We need your help." So then the doctor and the sheriff go and they dig up Freddy's body. Now, this is the part that I hate, because I know that the mom or the nun, she was saying, hey, here's what you got to do. You got to dig up his remains and blah, 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 blah. I didn't like this part. I did not like this part because not just because it gave me this sort of like exorcism kind of feel to it, although because the atmosphere of the movie didn't give me that at all. But the plot gave me that. You know, if I'm reading this on paper, I'm like, hell no. And then I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, I can see where they try to make it a little bit entertaining, with trying to, you know, but it's just the whole skeleton walking around and then you throw the holy water on a skeleton and then that's how Freddy does. That took me out of it completely, man. Took me out of it completely, almost to the point where, you know, not to spoil what we're going to talk about here in a minute, but it almost took me out of a very significant part that happened right before they kill Freddy with the holy water. So now we're sitting in the what do they call it, the car lot or junction, right? Junkyard. And you start to see all these, because you know, obviously in the junkyard, you know, the scenery in the junkyard, you're seeing these cars stacked up on top of each other, right?
Mm.
And then all the cars start to turn on, and I'm like, they did it again. Another creative way to make this movie a legit horror movie. The cars turn on, you see the lights turn on to the cars, then they start to come down and start to fall. They start running toward the sheriff runs towards the car to get into the car. Guess what? Boom, crushed by like two more cars. Now what do? Now you put your two characters into a situation where where as a viewer you don't know how they're going to get out of it. Creative as a motherfucker when it comes to getting the audience. Like I would have loved to see this movie in theaters when this movie came out, just to see other people's reactions, because this had to be the movie to do that. This had to be the movie to do that, because I'm a very, very avid horror movie viewer, right? I watch a lot of horror movies. And even me, I'm sitting there like, how the hell are they going to get out of this? Are they both going to die? Because I'm thinking, okay, he's going to kill them both now. But that doesn't happen. Now, we get to the part where the sheriff dies. That's where it kind of gets tricky with me. Because you kill the sheriff. Freddy kills the sheriff. Which again, I want to ask you, Mark, do you like the way the sheriff died, by the way? Did you even like the idea of them killing John Saxon's character?
Well, I honestly, I didn't really think much of it. I mean, you know, and that's the thing. I'm a John Saxon fan, and you know, I think he really did well in this film. But yeah, I don't know. I think I was just you know, it's kind of funny. You know, it's like when I saw that scene today, I still had my mind on what was going on with the kids, and Nancy and everything like that. So this scene, yeah, just kind of comes off to the side in a weird way, and so it's kind of I don't know how to put it all together in my head. So yeah, but so I don't know.
Like, all right. The reason why I asked that is only because when I watched the movie, I kind of saw it coming, and what I wanted to really do was have a feel for it, right? I wanted to feel something when he died, and I couldn't. I want to be like, man, fuck, man, they killed John Saxon. They killed the dad. They killed the sheriff.
Yeah.
I didn't feel anything.
Well, I mean, that's a good point.
You said, like, the placement was bad. It was like sort of out of nowhere. And I felt like, I don't know if there was some kind of contract or whatever. Obviously, I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes of the actual movie. I don't know the contractual obligations or whatever. But I would think that they would find a better way to kill the dad, who was such an important character, at least in the first one. right?
Yeah.
And the one thing that this movie did very great was, I won't say the one thing, because there's obviously many things they've done great, but another thing they did great with this movie was that John Saxon's character, not just his character, but Nancy as well. These two characters, you felt that after effect, no matter what your opinion was about the first one, or is about the first one. You see the terror in both of their eyes and throughout the entire movie. Nancy makes you feel the same effects that we all had and that she had from the first movie. The dad does as well. Maybe not as well as Nancy does, but the fact that John Saxon's character is sitting there, he's saying, I want nothing. Your daughter's life is on the line, and you still want nothing to do with Freddy Krueger. That tells me something about Freddy Krueger, not something about you. Doesn't tell me anything about your daughter. It tells me something about Freddy Krueger, that this guy is as bad as what they say. I mean, tell me when I'm lying, Mark. You know,
right.
Like, this is some next level shit that a lot of people, again, I will continue to beat this dead horse of they do not think this creatively in today's time. You're not seeing movies like this in today's time. Creative writing and creative storytelling, period, in today's time like this. It's the little things. They should have, if Dream Warriors never worked, they should have called this movie A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Little Things. Because that's exactly what this was. It was all about the little things that made the movie. Because you're seeing the way that Nancy is saying, hey, look, Freddy Krueger's the real deal. We can't kill him on our own. We need each other. We all need to be warriors and fall asleep together and kill this fucker. This was excellent. So now we see John Saxon's character get killed out of nowhere. And to me, I felt nothing. And I should have felt everything when he died. And if I didn't feel everything when he died, I should have felt everything when this happened, Mark. Very creative. Very creative, except for one thing, Mark.
What's that?
Came out of nowhere again. They hit him out of nowhere again. If they didn't, now, don't get me wrong. I give credit where credit's due. The way they killed Nancy, good. But how do you stab Nancy in her stomach in such a creative way like that? And then literally seconds later, you're shooting into the next scene.
Right.
Minutes before that, not many minutes before that, John Saxon dies. And you see him coming down, Nancy, I've crossed over to the other side, which is probably the worst thing you could ever say to your child when they're in a situation where they're running from the very person that just killed you. Probably very bad timing. But again, we find out later it's Freddy Krueger, and just seconds later it's Freddy Krueger. So everything's terrible. But you would think, even from a guy that haunts people in their dreams and nightmares and shit, that they would come up with something better to say than to the other side, give me a hug in front of everyone while you guys are running from this scary, scary guy. But anyways, that happens, Mark. And I want to have your thought on the death of Nancy. Was this not, because we know it wasn't, I mean, all right, I'm not even going to put words in everybody's mouth in terms of watching this movie, but to me, was this needed? No and yes. But with John Saxon's character, with the dad dying just minutes before, I'm going to go with this was not needed. This death was not needed. But Mark, what did you think about this death?
Oh, Nancy. Well, yeah, it's I mean, with that, of course, you know, it turning out to be, she's reunited with John Saxon, and then it turns out to be Freddy. I mean, that establishes what a ruthless motherfucker that Freddy can be. And of course, in the Nightmare universe, you really don't know when it's going to come, where it's going to come from, or what. So that really established that. But yeah, it was. I don't know. I kind of wish it was more impactful in a way. Yeah, you're right. It just was so quick. And yeah, and I earlier today when I watched it, I was just like, well, wow, that's it. I don't know. There was something like I just felt like she deserved more. I mean, if you're gonna kill her, I don't know. There was something, but yeah, you're right. I mean that part, and then yeah, the junkyard scene. Well, I don't know. The only thing that I think really tied it together, I guess, because it was kind of, I don't know. Disappointing. Like the doctor, whatever his name was, he ended up being the one to do it. I mean, of course, they wanted to keep it. I guess it wouldn't have. They couldn't have come up with a way like to bring all the kids to the junkyard so they could battle Freddy, right where he was buried or something like that. Yeah, but I don't know. The only thing that I can think of that would kind of save the fact that it was the doctor and all of that, and that it just kind of happened kind of quick, and whatever was the light in the house coming on in his room at the end, right? That was the doctor's room, right? Yeah. So yeah, that right there, because that could imply, and I don't remember much about 4 at all, but that kind of implies like, okay, well, he's the one that killed him. Oh, look at this. Freddy's back, and he's back at the guy that killed him,
Yep.
So, yeah, that tied it together. But I can't help but think, too, it's like, well, this guy, I mean, he was a major character, but I didn't care about him as much as, like, Nancy and Kristen. Yeah, there was something about that, well, where just defeating Freddy that way. But I don't know. I could also just say it's justifiable because, I mean, at this point, you could pretty much bet that it was going to be a franchise. Ironically, what I read was that one of the reasons why Wes Craven didn't do the second film was because he didn't want to see it become a franchise. But I guess he changed his mind or whatever by number 3. But I mean, I'm sure he wanted his legacy to be repaired after the thrashing by critics and fans that the number 2 got. So,
which I'm still somewhat surprised about that, because the second one was honestly, I mean, it was decent to me. For especially for a movie coming out in that time, in that day and age, a horror movie coming out in what that was 85. I thought the second one was pretty okay for an 80s horror. You're talking about the great horror movies that came out in the 80s. I mean, look, the second Nightmare on Elm Street isn't going to be among the top 5, but I mean, it was an okay movie. It was decent. I've seen much worse. I haven't seen Shopping Mall in almost 20 years, so. That could probably be up there. Probably be at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but I reviewed Chopping Mall for the Walter Paisley Cafe a few months ago. So.
Oh yeah, I think you told me. Yeah.
But I don't know. Well, this is definitely one of the movies that number 2 was definitely one of the movies that, at least with fans and even critics, it aged well. It sort of became one of those movies where people look back. That was, just like people hated it, and when it first came out and everything, and then, but looking back, people sort of see it differently. Especially the whole, the whole homoerotic, and subtext, things
Thanks
like
to
that.
Jesse.
What's that?
I said thanks to Jesse.
right, yeah, and so yeah, people made it differently. It's like I guess that's what's happened to Howard the Duck, where Howard the Duck was just like the go-to movie for awful movies, and then and I've heard this about the Garbage Pail Kids movie. In fact, HBO Max is going to make a new Garbage Pail Kids movie, and it's thanks to this sort of weird cult following that it has.
You know what they need to remake is if they're gonna remake any movie, do Gremlins. I want to see another Gremlins movie.
Oh wow! I loved those movies.
Quick note, by the way, quick question: is Gremlins? I might have asked you this before. Is Gremlins a Christmas movie?
I would say so. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I haven't watched the movie. It's been ages since I watched the movie. I wasn't really too big on Gremlins until I think I watched one of them as an adult, and I was like, this is really a lost treasure. But anyways, back to Dream Warriors. The aspect that we see later on in this movie is finally where we get to see, and again, something I have not seen in not just any other, Nightmare on, Freddy Krueger movie, but any other horror movie franchise, where you now see all of these people, not all these people, but we see about 4 of these characters now that are left fighting off Freddy in their own dreams. That to me was very, very special. And then they all meet up in that little pit or whatever that Freddy has. I still don't exactly know where the fuck that is. And then obviously, you got Nancy trying to save the day, blah, blah, whatever. Then we see Nancy die later on when they're inside the house. And now we get to this scene, right? The scene that Mark and I were just talking about. See, this part is horrible. Horrible. And that's the end of Freddy for this movie. Now, yeah. Mark, I want to ask you: which one is worse? And I'm sure I know at least what my answer is going to be. Between the first movie, the second movie, and this movie, which one had the worst way to kill Freddy?
Oh, well, let's see. Wow. How did Freddy die in the other two? I forgot.
So, and number 2, he died from it was the kiss of love, right? Or I should say the kiss of death.
Okay, yeah, that. And then the first one,
True Love Kills.
Yeah. How was he bumped off in the first one?
Oh, so the first one I guess it's the first one he technically didn't die, right? Because remember the first one, it was more of like he killed the mom and then he just pretty much went away. It just pretty much became a cliffhanger after that. So I'm not necessarily sure how he died in the first one. I think he was like stabbed once or twice or something like that and just went away. But my own personal opinion is I will say that the first one still takes the cake. In being the better way of at least getting rid of Freddy. I still think that this third one was a better way than the second one. I mean, the second one was just terrible. It's just like true love prevails or some shit. I have no idea. But between those 3, which one was the worst for you? Was it the quote unquote exorcism, or was it the kiss of death?
Well, I definitely gonna go. I'm still gonna go with the kiss of death one. Yeah, that's that was a bit insulting to my intelligence. So that's one of my that's one of the things that will kill a movie for me. You insult my intelligence or you bore me. Yeah. So, and if you do both, forget about it. So yeah.
Hello, Dune.
But with the thing about this ending is that, I mean, it was funny. I read that Wes Craven it was his intentions to end the franchise with the third one, but so much of it said otherwise. I think. I mean, obviously, with the light coming on at the end, that still gave the doorway. And I don't know. I mean, when I watched it today, having watched all the films, I still was like, I ain't buying it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's how could if Freddy's, unless I'm just mixing everything together from the uh, movies that were released afterward. But yeah, it just seemed like Freddy was too powerful to be outdone in such a way.
Yeah, and we're talking about the fact that Freddy Krueger and the three movies that we've seen him in so far, creative ways to kill these guys. He's now starting to get the feel, at least to us as the audience, right? We're starting to see where Freddy's getting a feel of who he is as a serial killer, as a slasher, as a guy that's haunting people's dreams and turning them into nightmares. We're starting to see a Freddy Krueger that's comfortable with playing with these victims and playing the sickest of games with these victims. Again, there are this movie is no holds barred when it comes to the character of Freddy Krueger. This dude lives by no rules whatsoever. We saw him turn into Nancy's father just to get close to Nancy, to kill her. Again, I mean, to me, that's like a Han Solo-esque kind of death, right? It's like, let me get close to you. Let's pull the viewers in and have the audience think that, it's a warm and cuddly moment in the middle of the final scene of a horror movie. Well, as we all know, horror movie 101 tells us, don't believe what you see when it comes to these cuddly moments, especially at the height of the movie, at the climax of the movie. Don't believe it. But for some reason, I don't know why, but for a split second, I believe that he came over and was into a new world in heaven or hell, wherever the fuck he was at. But he was in the afterlife, right?
What?
And Nancy, I've crossed over. And for some stupid reason, my idiot self believed it. Until you hear those what do you call them, razors just go into, or those knives go into Nancy's stomach. Then Freddy Krueger dies, and then we see Nancy dying in the arms of Kristen, who I thought was going to be the one to die. If anyone between her and Nancy were going to die, I thought it was going to be Kristen. And I was a bit underwhelmed because I will say my most controversial statement about this movie would be they should not have killed both John Saxon and Nancy in this movie. To me, it should have been one or the other, and it should have been John Saxon, and that way you keep Nancy over into the next movie, especially knowing, with me being spoiled, that Kristen gets killed. She doesn't last long in the fourth one. I'm assuming. That's what I've read. But why not keep a Nancy kind of like as your Laurie Strode of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise? Why not do that? But again, I guess we will have to see with these movies as this franchise continues to grow, at least, as we're watching them, obviously, and reviewing them, we're starting to see where maybe Freddy is starting to switch from victim to victim, different victim to different victim. But I think one of the tropes, right, that you would use for a horror movie franchise, especially when you're building it, is to keep a same primary character. So the fact that they actually killed off the only primary character that you had from the first one, pretty much, because the dad wasn't worth a shit. It's not like he was going to be the main character or anything. Mm-hmm. But you killed off Nancy in the third movie. So now where do we go? because now a lot of people are thinking, okay, Kristen, and again, Mark, I mean, you would know, like when they advertised for the fourth movie, were they advertising? Was it Kristen? Was she the poster child of this movie of the
Oh
fourth
man,
installment?
I really can't remember. I mean, going and watching the fourth one, it's going to be one of I am drawing a blank on what that movie, what happened in that movie. I only
Well,
saw
that's a
it.
good thing because we'll be watching that soon. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah. and
like
This will
watching it for
be
the first time.
a very. So I'll be going into this probably. I don't know. I'm sure it'll be like how it happens a lot when I haven't seen the movie in over 10 years, where I think I don't remember anything, and then once I start seeing things, then I start remembering. But yeah. But either way, at this point, I don't know what happens. So I could be surprised by a lot going in and watching the fourth one.
Yeah, because this movie hit it on all cylinders, man. To me, I think the only bad part to me was, or I wouldn't say the only bad part, but the worst part that stuck out to me was literally the ending, and not even the whole ending, not even like the very ending, that cliffhanger, because that was subtle. I like that. It could have been a lot worse, as we are used to, right? But that last, I wouldn't say fight scene, but obviously the death scene of Freddy, the death scene of Nancy, the death scene of John Saxon. But we see a lot of creative ways that Freddy killed in this movie, and that's what I loved about it as well. I mean, we got, it wasn't super complex storyline. Again, the background wasn't needed, but the fact that we had the mom, and then we had the plot twist in the end, where you see the doctor walking over towards the they're at the funeral, at Nancy's funeral. He turns around, he's in a sling, his arms in a sling, turns around, he sees the nun walking in the graveyard. He walks over there, and then he sees her tombstone, and it reads Freddy Krueger's mother. Or it was what? No, it reads Amanda Krueger, and then it says Sister Helen or whatever the fuck, right? So he's like, oh, and then obviously he does what you should never do in a movie, which is like, once we figure out what it is, he says it out loud, right? It's kind of like going back to Hot Tub Time Machine, right? Where it's like, I wonder if it could be looks at the camera, hot tub time machine. And that's pretty much what he was. Where he was like, oh, she was Freddy Krueger's mother all along.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why did you have to say that out loud?
That was
why did he really have to
redundant.
tell us? I'm thinking myself, I'm like, really? Like you had to just throw in that cheesy line just to make it cheesy. I'm like, that's but again, that's a minor thing, right? That's just me nitpicking, right? So now, Mark, I want to get to what my favorite part is of these movie reviews, and that is this, Mark. What was your grade after watching this movie for the first time in forever? I'm assuming, right? I'm pretty sure you're not throwing in a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors every once a year or anything like that.
No.
But I gotta ask you, is your perspective different after seeing it when watching it in chronological order with the past two, and after watching it for the first time in a long time? Has your perspective changed, and what was your grade for this movie?
Well, I remember really liking this movie, and I actually really found it enjoyable. And this conversation has sort of actually given me reasons to like it better in some ways. And yeah, I guess, but that's where they lose me a little, was in the end, where I don't know, just between everything, the doctor performing the exorcism or whatever it was, the John Saxon dying Nancy, where they're, I don't know. So, well, A minus.
You say, all right, wait, say that again. You say A minus?
A minus, yeah.
I am shocked. I'm shocked, Mark. Wow.
Well, I think it's a classic. I think it deserves that. I think it definitely is one of the best, if not the best, in the franchise. Although I'll tell what my favorite one of the franchise is when we get to that one. But
I'm excited now.
But yeah, I would say that this was the second one, unless I rewatch what I think is my favorite and think, wow, what the hell was I thinking? But otherwise, yeah, it's an '80s classic. For the third movie in a franchise to hit it out of the park the way this one did, I have to give it a pretty good grade.
I feel that. And I remember last week, you Smith and I talking about the second one
Mm.
and how weird that second one was, and in good ways and in bad, right? And how indifferent it was to the first. I think we all agreed that it was very different and had a very different tone, and for various and obvious reasons, right? The second one just completely, it just hit different than the first one. This movie kind of brought the roots, not just because we had Nancy and John Saxon's movie. I keep forgetting his actual name in the movie, but that's why I just keep saying John Saxon or Sheriff. But not the fact that we just brought those two characters back into this movie, but the fact that it just gives you that same vibe that the first one did, but it's more of a late '80s. It's still a movie of its times, and the fact that we're watching this 34 years later, this movie still is such an ageless movie. Because I can still, it's almost watching it as if I am living in the '80s as I'm watching this movie, because I'm like, wow, this is the style so '80s, it's also '80s, but where the story still hits to where you can understand where it's like, okay, it's not that '80s. See, because there's been plenty of movies that I've watched from this era, horror, action, comedy, whatever, where it's like, how many movies out there, Mark, are there that are from the '80s and from the '90s that where we loved when it came out, but then when you watch it later, when you're no longer in that area and it's no longer in that environment of just the '80s or '90s or whatever, to where it just doesn't hit the same. It kind of leaves you wondering, like, wow, was this movie only good because I watched it in the '80s at this time? Was this movie only good because I was into these mid '90s, these 1994, 1995 comedy classic movies, and then you try and watch it on a rainy afternoon in 2021, and you're like, wow, this movie doesn't really resonate in 2021. Like it was great to me in '94. Now 2021, not so much. I just felt like I just wasted 2 hours now. You know what I mean? Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but aren't there movies out there that are like that?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the thing about '80s movies that makes it weird for me is that there's actually there's some where movies that just really really worked for me. They really struck a chord. That just seemed to be timeless classics. I don't know, Ghostbusters comes to mind. Even like E.T. It's kind of funny how it's like, and maybe that's a good thing. It's like, I'm surprised they didn't drag E.T. out of the vault and start a new franchise or a reboot or something like that. I mean, but Steven Spielberg went back in and put walkie-talkies where the guns were and all that stuff. So that was kind of a bad stain on the history of that movie. Then, of course, you have Raiders of the Lost Ark, things like that. And looking back on the '80s, like when I was in the '80s as a teenager, there was a lot of things that I hated. Oh yeah, and I always say that I was a punk rocker back then, so I was the anti, whatever was trendy or whatnot. Although it wasn't like I hated everything. I mean, yeah, I liked the horror movies that were coming out and things like this. I just didn't like the music that was commercial, and then a lot of the movies. A lot of the movies I watched back in the '80s, I think were really strong with me because I watched a lot of horror movies or I watched some fantasy or even comedies. A lot of comedies did it. Comedies don't age very well a lot of times. And that's not even necessarily just because of the whole problematic sort of things that you could point out in the movie. Sometimes you just look back and like, well, that was a little bit too much of the times, but that's the way comedy is. It doesn't really last that long. But there's other ways. Like say you look
especially
at
like over the top ones too.
Right. Yeah. And so yeah, that's the thing. So it's like right now, not really a whole lot's coming to my mind because what I didn't think was very great in the 80s movie wise, I didn't bother watching. so I mean, it was just sort of, there were the heavy hitters back then. You had Spielberg, Joe Dante, we talked about him, the Gremlins, David Cronenberg, and just like all these directors that we could probably thank for the way we are getting more horror movies or more fantasy movies and things like that, where we don't have movies, science fiction and horror and all this stuff. That was kind of fringe. That was kind of a niche thing, and now it's a lot more mainstream. And it took the directors I just mentioned to really bring these kind of movies up into the fore. And they did it in a pretty good way. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, not every Spielberg movie is great, but his good ones are pretty good, and yeah, and then Wes Craven, I mean, he went back to the 70s, but that guy stayed relevant like so many times over and over again.
Yeah, including with Scream that came out in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
He continued to move with the times, and that's hard to do, and especially in the horror genre. As a horror director and creator and producer, writer, like this, like the dude stayed with the fucking times, and you got to look. Say what you want about Wes Craven, but this dude, you got to give him credit for that at least.
Oh,
if
definitely.
anything, got to give him credit for that. But this movie hit well on all cylinders, except for a couple. Which obviously was, the whole jump scare thing. But again, this movie still had that horror element to it. It wasn't an action-esque type of movie. But I would give this movie an A. However, the only reason why I won't give it an A is because of that ending, right? Because of the holy water with Freddy Krueger, had to dig up the body, and then now you see the skeleton. Freddy Krueger didn't even kill, John Saxon's character. If you really want to think about it, you really want to get technical, it was the skeleton, right? It was Freddy Krueger's skeleton. Again, that kind of took me out of it. So besides that, this movie is everything you want in a horror movie. Besides jump scares, it's everything you want in a movie. The creativity, the gore, the blood, the guts, all that stuff. Freddy Krueger even cut the mom's head off, and the mother's head was still talking. Great scene. The mother's head was still talking to the daughter. And then you had the plot twist, which again, the plot twist still didn't really hit with me. You had 3 plot twists in the last 20 minutes of the movie. All right, hell, I would say in the last maybe 10 minutes of the movie, if you really want to think about it, because you had the plot twist of, which I don't even think was a plot twist, which was John Saxon's death, his character's death, but technically plot twist, right? And then literally 2 minutes later, you had Nancy's death, plot twist. Both of those didn't hit at all. Neither one of those really hit the way they were supposed to, or at least the way I felt like we as the viewers should have had, right? And then you had a third plot twist, which was, again, another minor plot twist, which was Freddy Krueger's mom was a nun. And then you had the very end, which was that subtle fucking ending. So with that, I kind of had to dock down from an A, and I give this movie a solid B. And that is my reasonings for giving it a solid B, because this was your ideal horror movie for the late 80s. As we're now starting to head, we're 3 years away from the 90s and starting to get more towards that, more darker element of horror in terms of, you're gonna have your, even though I don't really count The Crow as horror, that's more action to me, but you're starting to get more towards like your The Crows, right? You're starting to get more towards, the Dark Cities. You're starting to get more towards what's another, early or mid 90s horror movie. Halloween 6 came out in the mid 90s, right? You're starting to get more towards that kind of era. We already know what kind of, atmosphere and aura that whole horror movie, the era horror movies of the 90s started, ushering in. So now with A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, to me, so far, this is the best one. Hands down, out of the first three, this movie has me now hooked in for this franchise. Now I know I'm in for a ride with the next movie, no matter how it's going to end. Now, it could be proven wrong, obviously, because anything's possible, so never say never. But I feel like I would never, again, knock on wood, never turn away from this franchise. I feel like I am now in for the ride of my life with the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Now, again, this is not a challenge for Wes Craven and company to prove me wrong. I want to be proven right when it comes to this, because I don't want to not like this franchise. Right now, I'm liking it. Right now, I'm hooked. Right now, I've got the seatbelt on. I've got my snacks ready. I'm in for it. I'm in for this long ride. We've got what? How many more movies to go with this franchise? 6 or something like that? 5?
Yeah, we've got the Dream Master. Is it the Dream Child? And unless I'm missing one, there's
Wes Craven's New Nightmare too, right?
Yeah, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and so yeah, if that's the 6th one, yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know if there was a 6 and then New Nightmare, and then Freddy versus Jason.
Okay, yeah, which is a really good one too. I can't wait to review that one, dude. That's gonna be awesome too. Which was also my first introduction to Freddy Krueger. I had got introduced to Jason, unfortunately, in Jason X, which I really hated as a kid. I hated that movie.
Oh yeah, as a kid. See, yeah, that's
yeah. So I haven't watched it again as an adult. Because it might change my idea of it. But that was my first introduction to Jason, was Jason X.
Yeah.
So that's why to me Jason didn't really hit as hard as it should have.
Yeah, when that movie came out, though, I was a long time fan of Jason, and that movie is critically reviled, but I loved it because there was just it was absurd, and so and whatever they were just playing with it in a way that they never did before, and but having never seen a movie with Jason or not knowing much about him. Yeah, I could see where you were like, what?
But Freddy versus Jason, I think I was reading that a lot of people said that was Robert Englund's probably his best version of Freddy was Freddy versus Jason. If I'm not mistaken.
That's critically acclaimed. That's like considered one of the best. So
and to think that was the last time we saw that version of Freddy. Because we got we got the John, was it John Haley, something Haley, James Earl Haley, I think is his name, as the new guy, as the new
remake,
Freddy. We should review that one too once we finish the series.
Oh yeah,
I know you don't like
all
that
things
one.
Freddy will go,
but oh man, that one was I really liked it, and then but after Jason X and then Freddy versus Jason, that remake of Friday 13th. That one to me was on point as well. But again, that's coming from someone who, before that movie, I never watched, the Friday 13 movies, prior to that. I did after that, but prior to that, I never saw any of the original movies. So, that's maybe that's a little bit biased of me to say that. Look, the reboot of Friday 13th was the shit. But we'll get more into that. But yeah. My grade here is going to be a B. Mark gives Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors an A minus, a surprising A minus. I thought it would have been a little bit better than the last one, but not that significantly better. But that's Mark. You blew me away in this one. You blew me away with this one.
Well, I mean, I have to admit though, it has a special place in my heart. I have a lot of bias, so that's the thing. It's like people might think, well, gee, Mark likes everything, but it's like, well, if we really want to start pulling out the garbage, I can do that. But
yeah, I can't. Yeah, I can't wait to review more of these movies. I cannot wait to even watch the fourth one, man, because after seeing this, and then the last thing we see is that light turn off in that little straw. Was it straw house or popsicle stick house?
Yeah.
I know we're in for a ride, man. But Mark, any last words on A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors?
Yeah, as I wanted to point out, you mentioned how you like the costumes in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Man, was that one of the coolest nun costumes you've ever seen? I mean, I don't know. There was, like she was all white, because I've never seen a nun like that, but it was a nun, and that was just a great design. I really like that. Also, just an interesting bit of trivia. What's that?
The little things.
Yeah. And one interesting bit of trivia was when Freddy told, there was something that somebody said about Freddy, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm stronger with the souls of the people that I killed." Yeah, my victims, and he pulls open his shirt, and there's all those faces in his torso, and they're moving and screaming and talking. Well, the thing about that is that they did that with those people that were in that particular shot. That wasn't animatronic; those were people, and they had to build like a really big Freddy torso so that the people could start, could stick their faces in through the, the latex or whatever it was made out of. So yeah,
and then they shrunk it.
That was, and the shot was just So they just made the shot look like it was Freddy sized, rather. But yeah, that was a bit of trivia I knew about that movie. But there's of course, that's one thing to look at this film and get and I have to wonder too if it looks like I don't know, because it would have had to have been pretty, but the scene where the balls from the desk toy, where the clacking balls, and then they started floating around to show that they were in. That looks CGI to me, but I mean, if it wasn't that it was animated, I don't know. So,
and the same with the skeleton as well.
Yeah, well, the skeleton was definitely stop motion. So I mean, and if you watch like old,
like the way it moved.
Yeah, like watch the first Terminator, because that's what came to my mind immediately. Like the first Terminator, when he became completely a skeleton, that was all stop motion, and so yeah, same type of thing with the Freddy skeleton. That was a whole stop motion sequence. I don't know if there was any CGI involved, but like I said, I mean, CGI was really fucking primitive by that time. But those balls probably could have been, because effects wise, they were one of the worst looking things in the movie, and a close second would probably be that stop motion skeleton. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, when I say, I don't know if you know who Ray Harryhausen is, but he's a legendary stop motion effects guy that did movies like the Sinbad movies and Clash of the Titans and different things like that. So and I loved watching that as a kid too. All those movies like the Sinbad, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and Jason and the Argonauts, things like that. So yeah, but like I said, when you look at that and you think of practical effects, and I don't know, I was kind of picking it apart in a way, like looking at how things were edited, things like that. Like with the girl when her track marks open up in the alley.
Yep.
And thinking about how that was done. Those were practical effects. They had to build, some sort of prosthetics. Of course, you see the way it was cut, where you actually didn't see her arms open up on her. They were close-ups of them.
Yeah.
But like I said, the most interesting thing was probably the big giant torso scene that they had to put like 6 people in it, stretching the rubber out and screaming and stuff.
And I have to give this film a pass when it comes to that, because I could clearly tell like there were some things where I was like, okay, they did this and they did that, like kind of like what you did, where it's like, all right, you could clearly tell that this was happening or whatever. Look, man, I gave it a pass, man. Normally I would pick a film apart and be like, man, you could tell this. I mean, it was the 80s. Yeah, we all know that. But they were just now starting to feel comfortable with just pushing all the, the CGI and everything out there. But story wise and execution wise, this movie did it for the most part. Again, this movie would get a clear A from me had they have not done the ending that they did. And, that's my biggest complaint that walking away from Dream Warriors. But to the audience, to you guys, let us know what you guys think in the comments. Let us know, did you guys like Dream Warriors? Was it your favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie? Or was it your worst or your least favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie? Let us know in the comments, please. And while you're here, whether you're watching live or watching later, be sure to hit that like. Also hit that subscribe, guys, because we've got a lot of content coming to you guys this summer. As we're going to continue to keep doing the movie reviews, continue to do the Hat Film Panel episodes as well. By the way, Mark, before we get out of here, I do want to let you know I finally watched that trailer of The Green Knight, and I got to say, I'm interested. Although that song sounded very familiar in the trailer that I watched. And normally I would be like, man, they really picked the same song as Captain America Civil War, because I remember hearing that song and I was like, this song, I remember hearing this song so epic with it, because I'm such a fanatic when it comes to movie trailers. So I'm like, I can like pick up, I'm like, okay, that's the song from, and I went back and I was like, that's the song from. They kind of changed it a little bit, but you could tell that it was kind of made from the Civil War trailer song. And I was like, wow. But the way they executed it, that trailer really made me want to watch, The Green Knight. I kind of want to see that movie, like a lot, just from watching that one trailer. And that's what trailers do for you guys. Just saying. And obviously, speaking of trailers, we didn't really get the Spider-Man trailer today, but that's another story for another time. I saw a lot of people that I thought were pretty credible on YouTube saying, "Oh, we're gonna get the trailer on Tuesday. Tuesday we get a trailer." Guess what? We didn't get it. Anyways, Mark, where can people find you?
You can look me up at my main station for now, the WalterPaisleyCafe.com, where you will get articles about movies, television, comic books, music, and more. You can find me at all the major social media places like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Look me up as Mark Plaid. Look me up as the Walter Paisley Cafe, and look me up as Spidau, SCHPIDAUU. And not to be pushy, but I'm sure Corn will put the link for TeePublic, my TeePublic storefront, down in the notes, so you can buy merchandise with my drawings and designs on them. That's what Spidau is. It's the Spidau storefront at teepublic.com, and for some reason you can only get to it via a direct link, because I've been on there and tried to search myself and it doesn't come up. So
Absolutely, man. And yeah, make sure you guys go and follow Mark, man. Mark puts a lot of time and effort and work into his stuff, man. And really good stuff he's doing over there. So make sure you guys show Mark some love, man. For real. But that is all we have for you guys here this evening Make sure make sure you guys hit that like, that subscribe. We got a lot of content coming. Whether you guys want to talk about movies, whether you want to talk about professional wrestling, whether you guys want to just want to watch one of my rants about what's going on in the entertainment industry, we got it all here on Half-Ass Podcast, and it's only gonna get more and more videos and more content coming and as time goes on. So make sure you guys are glued in. You guys are in for the ride because it's going to be a fun one this summer. But I am me, and this is Mark Plaid. We are Hap Film Panel, and we will be back with you guys next Tuesday. And we're Half-Ass Pod. We are OUT.